Thanks and good morning. I'm going to stand up because I can't hardly do that sitting down. So the first thing I'll do is I guess I'll arrive. There we go. So Ways to Work is a program that has evolved from the Alliance for Children and Families, my sister organization in Milwaukee. The Alliance is a national membership organization of nonprofit human service organizations around the country. So Ways to Work is a economic empowerment program that is distributed through that membership organization in an affiliate model. I think a franchise-like model is one way to look at it. So I'm going to run through a few what is Ways to Work stuff to give you the context of what we then faced and have gone through and help you maybe understand some of the reasons why or the wherefores of it. Give you a little background on Ways to Work first, though. So Ways to Work, as I mentioned, is a very unique community development financial institution that often called CDFIs. That's a certification from the U.S. Treasury Department. And we serve as intermediaries. Banks and other financial institutions, foundations make investments in us, and then we have a program that enables that money to be lent into hard-to-serve markets. Our clients are really, the hardworking families in America today that are up to 80% of area median income, but they have challenging credit histories or no credit history at all, especially immigrant populations. That's a very common thing where they have no credit history at all, thin file, no file situations. And our program provides them some classroom-based financial education, one-on-one financial education and budgeting, some credit repair guidance and strategies, and ultimately leading up to, we hope, if they're really ready for it, a loan generally used for the purchase of a reliable used vehicle. The loans are up to $8,000, up to 36 months. They're all at a flat 8% interest rate. Now for you that may sound high, but for our clients and where they live, that's at about 25% of market for them, maybe less than 25% of market for them. Their options are typically buy here, pay here lots that provide them both their credit at a very high rate as well as sell them a car that they can't negotiate the price on. But just on interest alone, our clients will save during the course of our loan, depending on its size and duration, between $750 and $4,000 in interest alone, besides getting a better car than what they would otherwise get. So the program really, I don't need for you to read all this, but I know they were going to post it, so I didn't just have the simple bullets. But it's really a very focused financial education that all applicants get, whether they make it to a car loan or not. So we have people that are with us just maybe for the classroom part. Maybe they progress from the classroom to the one-on-one, and maybe then they also progress to having a car loan. The funnel is about 10 to 1, so 10 entrants come in through the classroom piece for every one that actually progresses all the way to getting a loan. The car is very important for us. It's why they come, because they need a reliable vehicle. Their life is really a struggle because they don't have one. And it also helps the program because it both almost immediately enables their income to increase, but also enables us, so it's a carrot, but it's also a stick for us that we can, because it's a secured loan with the vehicle, if they don't change their behaviors and do the kinds of things that are necessary to be successful with a car, with a loan, we can take the car back, or at least generally just threaten to take it back is all that it takes to get them back on track. So there's a high degree of accountability that goes into it. That accountability really happens with their loan counselor. That person remains in their life from the point that they go to the one-on-one classroom piece all the way through their last payment. And it's that one-on-one case management and relationship and intervention that they do, whether it is encouragement, support, knowledge, or the occasional kick in the behind that they might need to be successful. That is the magic in the mix. So the Ways to Work model leverages existing networks. So it's the existing nonprofits in communities in Chicago nearby here. It's a Salvation Army and a Lutheran Child and Family Organization. In San Antonio, it's a Goodwill. It's all different kinds of brands of Catholic Charities in Albany, New York. All sorts of brands. This isn't a single brand of nonprofit, but it's a nonprofit that's decided to have this program. But it's because they have the knowledge of their local community and the needs of the local community and the other complementary resources in their local community that makes them so important. And it's having that program embedded there rather than having me in Milwaukee try to figure out who's the best car dealer, where else can I get mental health counseling or something else in Albany, New York. That's just not going to work. But having that local entity run it, it's really their program. We have centralized certain things that enable us to have efficiencies and economies of scale, but left other stuff local. And the other piece is we leverage mainstream markets. We are a financial intermediary, and that's key to our model. I think it's always a little bit interesting to do a little walk a mile in a person's shoes a bit. So there's a little 2-minute video here I'm going to run to give you a sense of the why of Ways to Work and sort of where our clients are and why we do what we do. If I can find the cursor. There we go. So Ways to Work, which began in the early 80s, was primarily just in Minnesota, came to the Alliance for Children and Families in 1996. I think Tom Harvey was still there at that point in time. And we began a national scaling at that point. Right now we have about 50 offices in 20 states. In the last couple of years, we've done over $12 million in new loan originations. We'll do about $8 million this year. Over that same period of time where we served about 2,400 in the last 2 years, we'll do about 8,000 in terms of those that get that financial education, that front end of the funnel that I talked about. And for us, the primary limiting factor has always been paying for that human intervention. And so when we considered evaluation, having something that fed into our ability to achieve that human intervention and fund it was certainly at the forefront of our mind when we went into evaluation. So again, we came out of early 80s welfare reform back when the Reagan administration was putting welfare moms back to work. A foundation had focus groups and asked them what they wanted, and they needed cash sometimes, but they wanted the dignity of paying it back. So one of the very first things we've always measured is repayment rates. And we began with a very quantitative bent that way in terms of measurement, but that's in that whole output category. It's really not the outcome stuff that we really want to get to. As we began this work and the replications on our scaling, every replication was an island. They had their own separate database, scattered around the country, very difficult to get a hold of information. As we evolved, we began centralizing things, and we centralized lending. We eventually, one of the real empowerments of our enhanced evaluation has been centralizing our database, having a cloud program management software that we house in Milwaukee that all of our agencies can use no matter where they are. And the evolution of the evaluation emerged both from these programmatic needs, an understanding as you're trying to replicate things, which components of the program are really important and which ones are maybe you think they're nice to have, but they don't really lead to any important outcomes or significant outcomes. And then also informing our investors, meeting their needs for the kinds of investments they want to make in the community that they want to serve. So our initial evaluations were all self-generated. We had an evaluation staff in the Alliance for Children and Families. They got a hold of some of these dispersed databases that are scattered around the country and maybe did some level of surveying, but they're mostly off of these internal data sources. There was really very little statistical analysis in achieving something that is statistically significant that you can really talk about with any power. In 06, 07, we'd really hit our replication goals and numbers of people served goals that were part of the 10-year demonstration. And our board said, what do we have here? Is this something that needs to continue? Is this something we need to take to an even higher level? Or are we really just fooling ourselves and doing something that makes us feel good, but that's about it? And so that was the time we hired our first external third-party evaluator. And I can tell you that's a lot easier than it sounds a lot easier than it really was. It's easy to hire somebody. It's not so easy to figure out what they should be doing for you, what are the questions that should be asked, how should it be structured, and who's going to manage them as a consultant internal to your organization. Because I don't know about your organizations, other than the academic ones in the room, we don't have a lot of people that with PhDs sitting around that are able to talk to another PhD evaluator and manage them effectively and make sure that they do the kind of things that are both important and valuable to our organization. Another unique thing that happened at this stage, two of our organizations that had been supporting Ways to Work for quite a while knew that we were going to struggle with this going into it. And so they both gave us about 20 grand each, 40 grand, for us to recruit a national design team that was going to help us put together an RFP, help advise us through the selection process of the evaluators, and then oversee, as in an advisory role, the evaluation process and final product. So we had people from the United Way of America, from Penn, from Brookings, from all sorts of organizations that we were able to, give them honorariums, cover their travel costs, all that kind of stuff, and really come up with a thoughtful RFP and really a rigorous selection process and so forth. That really helped. that first evaluation immediately upon its release and our dissemination through the media and things really started raising our profile. Funny aside on that, you know, we had been targeting like NPR and all these other kind of, you know, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever. The media thing that really gave us the kick and made us incredibly nervous before we saw what they actually did was Geraldo at Large, of all things. We were petrified before it aired, but actually it was a great piece, and we got more awareness out of Geraldo than we did out of everything else combined. Shows how much Americans read and whatever. Anyway, so that first evaluation actually left some questions unanswered or spurred new questions, to be honest. And so we ended up with a follow-on study that's turned into a longitudinal study that we added to every other year. And we're about to be doing that in a month or so for this iteration. We'll add another 2 years of data and 2 more years of new participants. And then with our most recent major evaluation, we added some quasi-experimental design to, I'm sure it can offend some people here now, but when we run into, especially national levels and so forth, there's a real snobbery around randomized control trials. I mean, this study right here that we did was over $250,000. The costs of doing an RCT, you know, probably 10x that. We're never going to do that, or the chance of us and most nonprofits doing an randomized control trial is virtually zero. You know, I think that those that have drunk the RCT Kool-Aid also need to be accepting of statistical models that get you close but don't cost, you know, the moon. The incorporation of a quasi-experimental control group or comparison group, not a control group, it was our first run at that, and we feel very good about it. We also used that to develop our first return on investment calculations. And doing it the first time, we had to look very specifically at certain groups of interest that were getting a return. We looked, of course, at our own borrowers, we looked at employers, and we looked at the taxpayers. And by the way, our ROI in this first time through came out at 248%, which we were pretty pleased with. So again, these are the studies that we've gone through. The first was our first major evaluation. It was really an outcomes evaluation. It was a combination of our internal data combined with client interviews and some other industry data that our evaluators were able to utilize. The second one, we actually used some internal data combined with data we purchased from TransUnion because, you know, at the end of the day, we're trying to improve the credit scores of our clients. Not one person I think that we work with would come to us to get a car loan if they had good credit. So the real issue is they need better credit. Credit is standardized through, you know, TransUnion, Experian, Equifax. We use TransUnion because, quite honestly, they were easier to work with than the other two. But it's the same basic data sets. And that's the basis of our longitudinal study. It goes back to January of 2002 and then adds new data sets and new clients every year after that. In 2011, we did the repeat of the 06 evaluation and enhancements to it. We updated the credit impact study, adding the propensity score matched comparison group, and we did our first ROI study. One thing that we did in our organization to make sure that we managed both our donor and investor expectations. We managed the vagaries of board membership, people coming on, going off, and staff coming and going. We actually have our investment documents and most of our major grant documents require that the major evaluations are part of the requirements of that. And the broad evaluation is on a 5-year cycle. As I mentioned before, the credit score impact study is on a 2-year cycle. We don't have the ROI study embedded in any documents, but I'm guessing that we're going to be continuing that as well. Just to give you real quickly, this was our very basic theory of change we started with the very first evaluation. As we progressed, so 5 years later, this is our logic model that we worked from. I don't expect you to read all that, but but this is certainly a lot simpler than that. But as you go through it, you add a lot more stuff and change your approaches. Again, these are the three studies, what we were looking for. So the program evaluation, credit impact study, return on investment. And just to sort of start bringing this to a close here, the internal studies that we had lacked credibility. I mean, our real challenges were whatever we said about ourselves, everybody said, yeah, that's nice. And that's about as much as you got out of it. We also didn't have the internal ability to manage this. We didn't know how to do it. We didn't possess our data, and that was a problem. It was in this affiliate model. You know, I don't know if Boys and Girls Club had a similar experience, but in our affiliate model, having the databases scattered to all the affiliates, that's a problem. The demographic challenges of our clients and their tendency to change addresses, change phone numbers, change locations, and just generally be hard to contact made it difficult, especially for something that is being done on 5-year cycles. That's a real challenge. Managing the expectation for frequency of renewal, and then of course getting the money for it. I mean, even with what we're doing, which isn't RCT, it's still expensive. But at the end of the day, it's become a part of what we are. It's become integral to our continuous improvement process of our program, because we've learned a lot about what steps in our program are really of value and what things are just maybe nice to do, and you can't always afford to do things that are just nice to do. And it's really helped us in our scaling to create a demand for the program being in different communities. We don't impose it on places. We get asked in, and that's really been a big part of it. The program visibility, just a couple weeks ago we were on the Today Show with a nice segment that really came out of some of the tail end of the PR of our last release in last April of the study, the big three-part study. It's helped in our donor communications, and it's certainly helped us have a voice in DC, in other places around the country. Bruce Katz's Metropolitan Policy Group just put out a book last week that we're featured in. It's just all part of the bricks in the wall of becoming relevant. So the lessons learned for us is get the resources and expertise you need to do a great job and get it early on. And then planning is just so important. You need to understand why you're doing it. If it's about process improvement, if it's about fundraising, if it's about policy, you need to have your targets really well understood up front. And we engage our stakeholders from the outset. I think that's really important. I think we can do a better job between cycles of keeping them engaged in thinking about evaluation. And the important part for us in an affiliate network is the external evaluation actually helps us manage our internal affiliates and have them be more accepting of change or whatever. It's had a big dividends on that. And it's clear to us that while we can, on a day-to-day basis, manage output on maybe more frequent sort of opportunities, we can look at outcomes. Really, where we are today, it's about moving to impact, and where you can to really moving to value and being able to quantify the value of what you do. And with that, I think I am going to hand the value part over, and I'll drive my car away.